This is the narrowest passage between NATO and danger. A small corridor of land, just 65 kilometers wide, connecting Poland and Lithuania, but separating the Baltic states from the rest of the Western Alliance. To one side lies Belarus, a close ally of Moscow. To the other, the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad, one of the most militarized regions in Europe. Here, peace and fear coexist, divided only by forests, rivers, and the memory of wars that once reshaped this land. Strategists call it Europe's Achilles heel, a bottleneck that, if cut, could isolate Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania from their NATO allies in hours. Yet to those who live here, in quiet Polish villages, Lithuanian fields, and small towns like Suwalki, this place is not a symbol of war but of endurance. They live between borders, between powers, and between histories that never seem to rest. The Suwalki Gap is not just a corridor of land, it is a corridor of destiny. A narrow passage where the balance of peace in Europe still depends on geography. Here, between peace and fear, Europe still holds its breath. On the map, the Suwalki Gap looks simple, a narrow bridge of land between two borders. But geography here is destiny. This is a landscape of rolling hills, thick forests, and glacial lakes, carved long ago by the last ice age. Beautiful but isolated. There are few major roads, no big cities, and terrain that slows any movement, whether civilian or military. The corridor stretches from the Polish town of Suwałki to the Lithuanian border near Mariupol. To its west lies Kaliningrad, armed with missiles, radar stations, and a fleet in the Baltic Sea. To its east, Belarus, with Russian troops stationed just beyond the tree line. Between them, only open farmland and two highways connect the Baltic states to the rest of NATO. In times of peace, it's a quiet region, a patchwork of fields, villages, and old Soviet-era outposts now reclaimed by nature. But to strategists, every river and hill here carries meaning. The Augustov Canal, the Niemen River, and the dense Białowieża forest form natural barriers that could both protect and trap. If conflict ever erupted, these same features that make the land beautiful would make it nearly impossible to defend. Geography gives the Suwalki Gap its weakness and its power. Because whoever controls this corridor controls the connection between the Baltic and the heart of Europe. It is not just a choke point on a map. It's a test of how geography still decides the fate of nations. The Suwalki Gap has always been more than a border. It is a corridor between powers, a strip of land shaped and reshaped by the tides of European history. In the 18th and 19th centuries, this region was part of East Prussia, the northern frontier of a rising German kingdom. Here, German merchants, Polish farmers, and Lithuanian villagers lived side by side, divided by language but united by geography. When the World Wars came, the gap became a front line. During the First World War, armies marched back and forth across these fields, German forces from Königsberg, Russian troops from the east, leaving behind burned villages and empty roads. After 1945, the map changed forever. East Prussia was cut in two, its northern half annexed by the Soviet Union and renamed Kaliningrad, while the southern part returned to Poland. For the next 4 decades, this corridor marked the border between the Soviet Empire and the Western world. Behind the Iron Curtain, it became a quiet, fortified edge of the Warsaw Pact, where NATO maps drew their red lines just beyond the forests. But history did not stop here. With the fall of the USSR, the Baltic states regained their independence, and Poland and Lithuania joined NATO. Suddenly, what was once a Soviet frontier became the front line of the alliance itself. Today, the Suwalki Gap remains a strategic hinge, the meeting point between Kaliningrad and Belarus, between the legacy of the Soviet Union and the ambitions of modern Europe. Every road, every rail, and every bridge in this narrow corridor carries the memory of shifting powers and the weight of what might come next. On the map, Kaliningrad looks like an island, a small Russian territory separated from the rest of its country, wedged between Poland and Lithuania on the Baltic Sea. But this enclave is no ordinary fragment of land. Once known as Königsberg, it was the medieval capital of East Prussia, home to Prussian kings, German philosophers, and the old ambitions of European empires. In 1945, after the Second World War, the city was captured by the Red Army. Its German population was expelled, its name changed to Kaliningrad, and its identity rewritten in the language of the Soviet Union. What remained became a fortress of the Cold War, a closed military zone filled with bases, shipyards, and missile silos guarding the western edge of the Soviet Empire. When the USSR collapsed, Kaliningrad was left stranded, Russian territory cut off by new borders, surrounded by countries that would soon join NATO and the European Union. Yet instead of losing importance, it gained a new kind of power. Today, Kaliningrad is Russia's only warm water port on the Baltic Sea, hosting the Baltic Fleet and advanced Iskander missile systems capable of striking deep into Europe. Its position allows Moscow to project influence across the region, from the Polish coast to the Scandinavian peninsula. Economically, it survives in paradox. Heavily subsidized by Moscow, yet connected to European trade routes. Industrial, yet geographically isolated. Its economy depends on manufacturing, port logistics, fishing, and energy imports. But it also serves as a listening post for Russia's intelligence network in Europe. For Russia, Kaliningrad is both a shield and a sword, a symbol of resilience from the Soviet past, and a reminder that even a small territory can carry enormous geopolitical gravity. And for NATO, it is the western wall of an unpredictable frontier, the ever-present force that gives the Suwalki Gap its tension. Belarus, the silent partner. The Suwalki Corridor, the narrow stretch of land connecting the Baltic states to the rest of NATO, owes its strategic importance to both geography and politics. Belarus functions as the eastern pressure point, leveraging its proximity and infrastructure to project power westward. The Hrodna region is pivotal. Its network of roads, railways, and logistical hubs enables the rapid deployment of units and the steady flow of military support. Joint exercises, particularly the Zapad maneuvers, illustrate how Russia and Belarus rehearse the closure of the corridor. These drills simulate route blockages, control of key crossings, the deployment of ground forces, and the integrated use of air defense and precision artillery to isolate critical zones. Such scenarios test not only military capacity, but also the logistical coordination and reaction times required for an effective blockade. The strategic union between Belarus and Russia formalizes this technical and operational cooperation. Defense agreements, shared base access, and combined exercises that deepen interoperability. Collectively, Belarusian geography completes the pincer. Forces from Kaliningrad in the northwest and Belarus in the east could converge on the strip, severely complicating any NATO attempt to resupply or reinforce the Baltic states. Ultimately, the corridor's vulnerability is hybrid, a fusion of geography, infrastructure, military doctrine, and political alignment. NATO's response must go beyond troop presence, emphasizing logistical resilience, secure communications, and political cohesion to neutralize the silent partner's multiplier effect. Poland, the eastern shield of NATO. If the Baltic states are the edge, Poland is the shield. Its geography makes it the natural stronghold of the Atlantic Alliance against the axis formed by Kaliningrad and Belarus. Stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Carpathian Mountains, Poland controls access to the Suwalki Corridor, the lifeline that keeps the Baltic states connected to Western Europe. The Polish-Lithuanian Cooperation Zone, where the Rail Baltica project meets the Via Carpathia Highway, is far more than an economic undertaking. It is a strategic artery. Along this route would flow not only European commerce but also NATO reinforcements in times of crisis. Aware of this responsibility, Poland has transformed its northeastern frontier into a fortified line. The bases at Suwałki, Augustów, and Białystok serve as advanced observation points, equipped with air defense systems, long-range radar, and a rotational presence of Allied troops. Over the past decade, Warsaw has launched the most ambitious military modernization program in Eastern Europe. It has acquired Abrams and K2 tanks, Patriot systems, Bayraktar drones, and F-35 fighters, enhancing its deterrence capabilities. Yet Poland's strength lies not only in its firepower, but in its regional coordination. Alongside Lithuania, it has developed joint commands, combined exercises, and logistical protocols to ensure a rapid response in the Suwalki Gap. Poland understands that its destiny is intertwined with that of the Baltic nations. In the event of aggression, it would be the shield absorbing the first blow. And it is precisely that conviction, geographical, political, and strategic, that makes Poland the eastern pillar of NATO. Suwalki, the eastern bottleneck of NATO. The Suwalki corridor is far more than a strip of land. It is the logistical choke point of the Atlantic Alliance. In the event of a crisis, the resupply of the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, would depend on a single highway and railway line cutting through rolling hills, forests, and small towns. A narrow, exposed passage where any obstruction could turn the Baltics into isolated military islands, cut off from the rest of Europe. In recent NATO summits, this vulnerability has taken center stage. Allies have expressed growing concern over increased Russian and Belarusian military activity near the Polish border, as well as exercises simulating the corridor's closure. In response, NATO has strengthened its enhanced forward presence strategy, deploying permanent multinational battalions across the Baltic states and Poland, capable of immediate reaction. The accession of Finland and Sweden has reshaped the strategic map of Northern Europe. Their inclusion extends the alliance's flank to the Arctic, opening new logistical routes across the Baltic Sea and offering partial alternatives to the Suwalki Passage. Yet the dilemma remains. Topography and distance continue to impose structural limitations. As one NATO officer put it, the Suwalki corridor is like a bridge too small to bear the weight of a continent. That bridge has become the metaphor for NATO itself, an immense force resting on a fragile point, where geography dictates strategy, and where the balance between deterrence and vulnerability will define the future of Europe's eastern flank. Suwalki. Life along the corridor. From Warsaw to Vilnius, the road winds through plains, gentle hills, and dense forests, a route where history, nature, and geopolitics intertwine. As one travels northeast, the modern pulse of Poland's capital, with its high-speed trains and European bustle, slowly yields to a landscape of lakes and birch trees, the heart of the Suwalki corridor, NATO's most fragile point. In Suwałki, Szczecin, and Druskininkai, daily life moves at a calm, unhurried pace. Neighbors greet each other in the streets, local markets sell bread and honey, and children pedal to school across meadows seemingly untouched by the weight of global strategy. Yet, from time to time, the rural quiet is broken by the rumble of a NATO convoy, tanks, armored vehicles, and Allied flags rolling down the same roads that sustain everyday life. The image is profoundly symbolic. Children on bicycles passing beside military convoys. Two worlds coexist, the simplicity of daily life and the machinery of continental defense, divided only by the width of a single road. Across the border, in Vilnius, the Lithuanian capital, the tension becomes more tangible. A vibrant city aware of its role as the last line before the East. Life along the corridor is a constant contrast, from the bustle of Warsaw to the stillness of the Baltic countryside, from apparent peace to the distant echo of strategy. It is a narrow stretch of Europe where serenity and vigilance meet, a landscape where history breathes quietly, and the continent's shared fate is written between the rhythm of life and the shadow of geopolitics. Imagine this. In the early hours of a gray morning, satellite images detect movement on both sides of the Suwalki Gap. From the west, armored divisions roll out of Kaliningrad. From the east, columns advance from Belarus. Within hours, the narrow corridor between them begins to close. For the Baltic states, it would be the nightmare long theorized by strategists, the isolation of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia from the rest of NATO. Supply routes cut, communications disrupted. The only land bridge connecting the Baltics to Europe, gone. NATO air patrols would scramble from Poland and Germany, but the terrain is unforgiving and the window of time dangerously short. Suddenly, a regional incident becomes a test of a global promise. Article 5, the cornerstone of NATO. An attack on one shall be considered an attack on all. But what counts as an attack? A few skirmishes at a border post? A training accident? Cyber interference that cripples transport and power lines? The ambiguity is what makes the Suwalki Gap so volatile. In a world of instant escalation, a local spark here could ignite a confrontation far beyond these forests. Diplomats call it deterrence. Commanders call it readiness. But for the people who live near this border, it means living under the weight of a hypothetical that could reshape Europe overnight. If the Suwalki Gap ever breaks, it would not just split a map. It could fracture the balance of peace the continent has known for generations. Geography doesn't start wars, but it decides how far they can go. The Suwalki Gap is proof of that, a narrow line where history, power, and land still shape the meaning of peace. For centuries, this corridor has connected and divided empires, carried armies and merchants, and watched the rise and fall of flags. Today, it stands as a reminder that peace in Europe is not a given. It is maintained, negotiated, and defended, kilometer by kilometer. To live here is to understand balance between East and West, between fear and resilience, between what is fragile and what endures. The forests will remain, the rivers will keep flowing, but the borders drawn upon them will always tell the story of human ambition. Geography shapes our history and reminds us how delicate it still is, because even the smallest gap can define the fate of a continent. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Leave your reflections below, subscribe to the Geography channel for more geopolitical explorations, and share this video to expand the discussion. See you next time in our ongoing journey through history, power, and place.